Skipping Christmas by John Grisham. Day 5. Chapter 12. Christmas Eve. Luther and Nora slept until almost 7 a.m. when the phone awakened them. "May I speak to Frosty?" came the voice of a teenager, and before Luther could shoot back a retort, the line was dead. He managed to laugh, though, and as he jumped out of bed, he patted his rather firm stomach and said, "The islands are calling us, dear. Let's pack." "Fetch my coffee," she said, and slid deeper under the covers. The morning was overcast and cold, and the chance of a white Christmas 50-50. Luther certainly didn't want one. Nora would lapse into a spell of nostalgia if snow fell on Christmas Eve. She'd grown up in Connecticut, where, according to her, every Christmas had been white. Luther didn't want the weather meddling with their flight tomorrow. He stood at the front window, exactly where the tree would have been, sipped his coffee, gazed upon his lawn to make sure it had not been vandalized by Spike Fromeyer and his band of outlaws, and looked at the Shield home across the street. In spite of all its lights and decorations, it was a gloomy place. Walt and Bev were in there, having their coffee, sleepwalking through the motions, both knowing but not saying that this could be their last Christmas together. For a moment, Luther felt a twinge of regret about eliminating Christmas, but it didn't last long. Next door, things were certainly different at the Trogdons. They had followed the odd custom of playing Santa Claus on the morning of Christmas Eve, 24 hours before the rest of the world, then loading their minivan and racing off to a lodge for a week of skiing. Same lodge every year, and Trogdon had explained that they had Christmas dinner in a stone cabin before a roaring fireplace with 30 other Trogdons. Very cozy, great skiing, kids loved it, and the family got along. Different strokes. So the Trogdons were already up and unwrapping piles of gifts. Luther could see movement around their tree, and he knew that before long they'd be hauling boxes and bags to the van, then the yelling would start. The Trogdon kids would be whisked away before they were forced to explain how, exactly, they got such a favorable deal from Santa Claus. Otherwise, Hemlock was still and quiet, bracing itself for the festivities. Luther took another sip and grinned smugly at the world. On the morning of a typical Christmas Eve, Nora would bounce out of bed at sunrise with 2 long lists, one for her and even longer one for him. By 7, she'd have a turkey in the oven, the house spotless, the table set for the party, and her thoroughly defeated husband out in the jungle trying to beat last-minute traffic with his list. They'd bark at each other face-to-face and by cell phone. He'd forget something and be sent back into the streets. He'd break something and the world would come to an end. Total chaos. Then around 6, when they were both exhausted and sick of the holidays, their guests would arrive. Their guests would also be dog-tired from the frenzied ordeal of Christmas, but they would push on and make the best of it. The Crank Christmas party had begun years earlier with a dozen or so friends over for appetizers and drinks. Last year, they'd fed 50. His smug smile spread even wider across his face. He relished the solitude of his home and the prospect of a day with nothing to do but throw a few clothes in a suitcase and get ready for the beaches. They enjoyed a late breakfast of tasteless bran cereal and yogurt. Conversation over the Gazette was soft and pleasant. Nora was trying gamely to ignore the memories of past Christmases. She worked hard at being excited about their trip. "Do you think she's safe?" she finally asked. "She's fine," Luther said without looking up. They stood at the front window and talked about the Shields, and they watched the Trogdons move about. Traffic picked up on the Hemlock as folks ventured out for one last foray into the madness. A delivery truck stopped in front of their house. Butch, the delivery man, bounded out of it with a box. He ran to the front door just as Luther was opening it. "Merry Christmas," he said tersely, and practically threw the package at Luther. A week earlier, during a less stressful delivery, Butch had lingered a bit, waiting for his annual gratuity. Luther had explained that they were not celebrating Christmas this year. "See, we have no tree, Butch. No decorations, no gifts, no lights in the shrubs, no Frosty on the roof, just dropping out this year, Butch. No calendars from the police, no fruitcakes from the firemen. Nothing, Butch." Butch left with nothing. The box was from a mail-order outfit called Boca Beach. Luther found them on the internet. He took the package to the bedroom, locked the door, and put on a matching shirt and shorts outfit that in print had looked just a little offbeat, but now, hanging on Luther, looked downright gaudy. "What is it, Luther?" Nora said, banging on the door. It was a yellow, aqua, and teal print of marine life, large flat fishes with bubbles floating up from their mouths. Whimsical, yes. Silly, yes. And Luther decided right there on the spot that he would love it and wear it proudly around one of the pools on the Island Princess. He yanked open the door. Nora covered her mouth and was instantly hysterical. He paraded down the hall, wife behind him in stitches, his brown feet and toes a sharp contrast to the khaki carpet, and he marched into the living room where he stood proudly at the front window for all of Hemlock to see. "You're not going to wear that," Nora roared from behind him. "I certainly am." "Then I'm not going." "Yes, you are. It's hideous. You're just jealous because you don't have this outfit." "I'm thrilled that I don't have it." He grabbed her and they danced around the room, both laughing. Nora to the point of having tears in her eyes, her husband an uptight tax accountant with a stodgy outfit from like Wiley and Beck, trying his best to dress like a beach bum, and missing badly. The phone rang. As Luther would remember after, he and Nora stopped their dancing and laughing on the second ring, maybe the third, and for some reason paused and stared at the phone. It rang again, and he walked a few steps to get it. Things were deathly still and quiet, as he recalled later. Everything seemed to be in slow motion. "Hello," he said. For some reason, the receiver felt heavier. "Daddy, it's me." He was surprised. Then he was not. Surprised to hear Blair's voice, but then not surprised at all that she had schemed some way to get to a phone to call her parents and wish them a Merry Christmas. They had phones in Peru, after all. But her words were so crisp and clear, Luther had trouble picturing his beloved daughter on a stump in the jungle, yelling into some portable satellite phone. "Blair," he said. Nora bolted to his side. The next word that registered with Luther was the word Miami. There were words just before it and some after, but that one stuck. Just seconds into the conversation, Luther was treading water and about to sink. Things were swirling. "How are you, dear?" he asked. A few words, then that Miami word again. "You're in Miami," Luther said, his voice high and dry. Nora shuffled quickly so that her eyes, wild and harsh, were just inches from his. Then he listened. Then he repeated, "You're in Miami, coming home for Christmas. How wonderful, Blair." Nora's jaws dropped. Her mouth fell open as wide as Luther had ever seen it. More listening, then, "Who? Enrique?" Then a full volume, Luther said, "Your fiancé? But what fiancé?" Nora somehow managed to think, and she pushed the speaker button on the phone. Blair's words poured forward and echoed around the living room. "He's a Peruvian doctor, and I met him after I got here, and he's just so wonderful. We fell in love at first sight, and within a week decided to get married. He's never been to the States, and he's so excited. I've told him all about Christmas there, the tree, the decorations, Frosty up on the roof, the Christmas party, everything. Is it snowing, Daddy? Enrique has never seen a white Christmas." "No, honey, not yet. Here's your mother." Luther handed the receiver to Nora, who took it, though with the speaker button down, it wasn't needed. "Blair, where are you, dear?" Nora asked, doing a good job of sounding enthused. "In Miami Airport, Mom, and our flight gets home at 6:03. Mom, you're gonna love Enrique. He's the sweetest thing and drop-dead gorgeous, too. We're crazy in love with each other. We'll talk about the wedding, probably do it next summer. Don't you think?" We'll see." Luther had fallen onto the sofa, apparently stricken with a life-threatening ailment. Blair gushed on. "I've told them all about Christmas on Hemlock, the kids, the Frosties, the big party at our house. You're doing the party, aren't you, Mom?" Luther, near death, groaned, and Nora made her first mistake. In the panic of the moment, she could not be blamed for muddled thinking. What she should have said was what she wished she'd said. What Luther later, with perfect hindsight, claimed she should have said was, "Well, no, honey, we're not doing the party this year." But nothing was clear right then, and Nora said, "Of course we are." Luther groaned again. Nora looked at him, the fallen beach bum in his ridiculous costume, lying over there like he'd been shot. She'd certainly shoot him if given half a chance. "Oh, great. Enrique has always wanted to see Christmas in the States. I've told him all about it. Isn't this a wonderful surprise, Mom?" "Oh, honey, I'm so thrilled," Nora managed to get out with just enough conviction. "We'll have a grand time. Mom, no gifts, okay? Please promise me no gifts. I want to surprise you by coming home, but I don't want you and Daddy running around right now buying a bunch of gifts. Promise?" "I promise." "Great. I can't wait to get home." "You've been gone only a month," Luther wanted to say. "Are you sure this is okay, Mom?" As if Luther and Nora had a choice. As if they could say, "No, Blair, you can't come home for Christmas. Turn around, dear, and go back to the jungles of Peru." "I gotta run. We fly from here to Atlanta, then home. Can you meet us?" "Of course, dear," Nora said. "No problem. And you say he's a doctor?" "Yes, Mother, and he's so wonderful." Luther sat on the edge of the sofa with his face stuck in his palms and appeared to be crying. Nora stood with the phone clutched in her hand and her hands on her hips, staring at the man on the sofa and debating whether or not to hurl it at him. Against her better judgment, she decided not to. He opened his palms just wide enough to say, "What time is it?" "It's 11:15, December 24th. The room was frozen for a long time before Luther said, "Why did you tell her we were having the party?" "Because we are having the party." "Oh. I don't know who's coming or what they're going to eat when they get here, but we're having a party." "I'm not sure." "Don't start, Luther. This is your stupid idea. You didn't think it was stupid yesterday. Yeah, well, today you're an idiot. We're having the party, Mr. Beach Bum, and we're putting up a tree with lights and decorations, and you're going to get your little brown butt up on the roof and do Frosty." "No." "Yes." Another long pause, and Luther could hear the clock ticking loudly somewhere in the kitchen, or perhaps it was the steady pounding of his heart. His shorts caught his attention. Just minutes earlier he'd put them on in anticipation of a magical trip to paradise. Nora put the phone down and went to the kitchen, where drawers were soon being slammed. Luther continued staring at his colorful shorts. Now they made him ill. Gone were the cruise, the beaches, the islands, the warm waters, and the non-stop food. How could one phone call change so much? Chapter 13. Luther slowly made his way to the kitchen where his wife was sitting at the table, list already underway. "Can we talk about this?" he pleaded. "Talk about what, Luther?" she snapped. "Let's tell her the truth." "Another dumb idea." "The truth is always better." She stopped writing and glared at him. "Here's the truth, Luther. We have less than 7 hours to get this place ready for Christmas." She should have called earlier. No, she assumed we'd be here with a tree and gifts and a party, same as always. Who would ever dream that two otherwise sensible adults would skip Christmas and go on a cruise? Maybe we can still go. Another dumb idea, Luther. She's coming home with her fiancé. Is this registering with you? I'm sure they'll be here for at least a week. I hope so, anyway. Forget the cruise. You have bigger problems right now. I'm not doing Frosty. Yes, you are. And I'll tell you something else. Blair will never know about the cruise. Understand? She'd be crushed if she knew we planned it, and that she'd interfered. Do you understand me, Luther? Yes, ma'am. She thrust a sheet of paper at him. "Here's the plan, bozo. You go buy a tree. I'll get down the lights and ornaments. While you're decorating it, I'll hit the stores and see if there's any food left for a party." "Who's coming to the party?" "I haven't got that far yet. Now move. And change clothes. You look ridiculous." "Don't Peruvians have dark skin?" he asked. Nora froze for a second. They stared at each other, then both looked away. "I guess it doesn't matter now," she said. "She's not really getting married, is she?" Luther said in disbelief. "Well, we'll worry about the wedding if we survive Christmas." Luther darted to his car, cranked it, backed down the driveway quickly, and sped away. Leaving was easy. Returning would be painful. Traffic got thick in a hurry, and as he sat still, stewed and fumed and cursed. 1,000 thoughts raced through his overworked brain. An hour earlier he'd been enjoying a restful morning, sipping his third cup of coffee, etc., etc. Now look at him, just another loser lost in traffic while the clock ticked away. The Boy Scouts sold trees in a Kroger parking lot. Luther skidded to a stop and jumped from his car. There was one Boy Scout, one Scoutmaster, one tree. The business was winding down for the season. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Crank," said the Scoutmaster, who looked vaguely familiar. "I'm Joe Scanlon, same guy who brought a tree to your house a few weeks ago." Luther was listening, but he was also staring at the last tree, a crooked, spindly dwarf of a pine shrub that had been passed over for good reasons. "I'll take it," he said, pointing. "Really?" "Sure. How much?" A handmade sign leaning against a pickup truck listed various prices, beginning with $75 and falling all the way to $15 as the days had passed. All prices, including the $15, had been scratched through. Scanlon hesitated, then said, $75. "Why not 15? Supply and demand." "It's a rip-off. It's for the Boy Scouts. I'll give you 50. 75, take it or leave it." Luther handed over the cash, and the Boy Scout placed a flattened cardboard box on top of Luther's Lexus. They wrestled the tree up and onto the car, then secured it with rope. Luther watched them carefully, glancing at his watch every 2 minutes. When the tree was in place, the hood and trunk were already accumulating dead pine needles, lots of them. "It needs water," said the scout. "I thought you weren't doing Christmas," Scanlon said. "Merry Christmas," Luther said gruffly, getting in his car. "I wouldn't drive too fast." "Why not?" "Those pine needles are awfully brittle." Back in traffic, Luther sat low behind the wheel and stared straight ahead as he crept along. At a traffic light, a soft-drink delivery truck eased next to him and stopped. He heard someone yell, looked up to his left, then cracked his window. A couple of rednecks were staring down, grinning. "Hey, buddy, that's the ugliest tree I've ever seen," yelled one. "It's Christmas. Come on, spend some money," yelled the other, and they roared with laughter. "That tree's shedding faster than a dog with mange," yelled one of them, and Luther raised his window. Still he could hear them laughing. As he neared Hemlock, his pulse quickened. With a little luck, maybe he could make it home without being seen. Luck? How could he hope for good luck? But it happened. He roared past his neighbors' homes, hit the driveway on 2 wheels, and came into a sliding stop in the garage. All this without seeing a soul. He jumped from the car and was pulling at the ropes when he stopped and stared in disbelief. The tree was completely bare. Nothing but crooked limbs and branches. No greenery whatsoever. The brittle pine needles Scanlon had warned him about were still blowing in the wind between Kroger and Hemlock Street. The tree was a pitiful sight lying there on the flattened cardboard, dead as driftwood. Luther looked around, scanned the tree, then yanked the tree off the car and pulled it through the garage door and into the backyard where no one could see it. He toyed with the idea of lighting a match and putting it out of its misery, but there was no time for ceremonies. Thankfully, Nora had already left. Luther stomped into the house and almost crashed into a wall of boxes she'd hauled from the attic. Boxes carefully marked. New ornaments, old ornaments, garland, tree lights, outside lights. 9 boxes in all, and he'd been left with the chore of emptying their contents and decorating the tree. It would take days. What tree? On the wall by the phone, she'd tacked a message with the names of 4 couples for him to call. All were very close friends, the kind you could confess to and say, "Look, we've screwed up. Blair's coming home. Please forgive us and come to our party." He'd call them later. But the note said to do it now, so he dialed the number for Jean and Annie Laird, perhaps their oldest friends in town. Gene answered the phone and had to yell because a riot was underway. "Grandkids," he said. "All 4 of them. Got an extra spot on the cruise ship, old boy?" Luther gritted his teeth and plowed through a quick narrative, then gave the invitation. "What a bummer," Gene yelled. "She's coming home now?" "Right." "In bringing a Peruvian?" "You got it. Quite a shock, really. Can you guys help us out?" "Sorry, pal. We got family in from 5 states." "Oh, they're invited too. We need a crowd." "Let me check with Annie." Luther slammed down the phone, looked at the 9 large boxes, and was hit with an idea. Probably a bad idea, but at the moment good ones were scarce. He ran into the garage and gazed across the street at the Trogdon house. The van was packed with luggage, and the skis were strapped across the top. Wes Trogdon emerged from his garage with a backpack to throw on board. Luther stepped quickly across the Beckers' front lawn and yelled, "Hey, Wes!" "Hello, Luther," he said hurriedly. "Merry Christmas." "Yeah, Merry Christmas to you." They met behind Trogdon's van. Luther knew he had to be quick. "Look, Wes, I'm in a bit of a jam." "Luther, we're late. We should have been on the road 2 hours ago." Small Trogdon darted around the van, firing a space gun at an unseen target. "Just take a minute," Luther said, trying to be cool, but hating the fact that he was begging. "Blair called an hour ago. She'll be home tonight. I need a Christmas tree." The hurried and stressed look on Wes's face relaxed, then a smile broke out. Then he laughed. I know, Luther said, defeated. "What are you going to do with that tan?" Wes asked between laughs. Okay, look, Wes, I need a tree. There are no more trees for sale. Can I borrow yours?" Trish screamed from somewhere inside the garage. "Wes, where are you?" "Out here," he yelled back. "You want my tree?" "Yes, I'll return it before you get home, I swear." "That's ridiculous." "Yes, it is, but I have no choice. Everybody else will be using their trees tonight and tomorrow." "You're serious, aren't you?" "Dead serious. Come on, Wes." Wes pulled a key ring from his pocket and removed the ones to the garage door in the house. "Don't tell Trish," he said. "I swear I won't. And if you break an ornament, then we're both dead." "She'll never know it, Wes, I promise." "This is funny, you know." "Why am I not laughing?" They shook hands, and Luther hurried back to his house. He almost made it when Spike Frohmeyer wheeled into his driveway on his bike. "What was that all about?" he demanded. "I beg your pardon," Luther said. "You and Mr. Trogdon. Why don't you mind your own?" Luther caught himself and saw opportunity. He needed allies at the moment, not enemies, and Spike was just the type. "Hey, Spike, buddy," he said warmly. "I need a little help." "What's the deal?" "The Trogdons are leaving home for a week, and I'm going to keep their tree for them." "Why?" "Trees catch on fire a lot, especially ones loaded with lights. Mr. Trogdon is worried about the tree getting too hot, so I'm going to move it over to my house for a few days." "Just turn the lights off." "Still got all those wires and stuff. It's pretty dangerous. Think you could give me a hand? I'll pay you $40. $40? You got a deal. We need a small wagon. I'll borrow Clem's. Hurry, and don't tell anybody." "Why not?" "It's part of the deal, okay?" "Sure, whatever." Spike sped away, off on a mission. Luther took a deep breath and gazed up and down Hemlock. Eyes were watching him, he felt sure. The way they'd been peeking at him for weeks now. How did he become such a villain in his own neighborhood? Why was it so hard to dance to his own beat once in a great while? To do something no one had dared? Why all this resentment from people he'd known and liked for years? Regardless of what happened in the next few hours, he vowed that he would not be reduced to begging his neighbors to come to the party. First, they wouldn't come because they were ticked off. Second, he wouldn't give them the satisfaction of saying no. Chapter 14. His second call was to the Albritons, old friends from church who lived an hour away. Luther spilled his guts, and by the time he finished, Riley Albritton was roaring with laughter. "It's Luther," Riley said to someone in the background, probably Doris. Blair just called. She'll be home tonight." And that Doris, or whoever it was, broke into hysterics. Luther wished he hadn't called. "Help me out here, Riley," he pleaded. "Can you guys stop by?" "Sorry, bud. We're going to the McIlvaines for dinner. They invited us a bit earlier, you know." "All right," Luther said and hung up. The phone rang immediately. It was Nora. Her voice was as edgy as Luther'd ever heard it. "Where are you?" she demanded. "Well, I'm in the kitchen. Where are you?" "I'm sitting in traffic on Broad, near the mall." "Why are you going to the mall?" "Because I couldn't park at the district. Couldn't even get in off the street. I've bought nothing." "Do you have a tree?" "Yes, a real beauty." "Are you decorating it?" "Yes, I have Perry Como crooning Jingle Bells in the background while I'm sipping eggnog and trimming our tree. Wish you were here." "Have you called anyone?" "Yes, the Lairds and the Albritons. Neither can make it." "I've called the Pinkertons, Harts, Malones, and Berklands. They're all busy." Pete Hart laughed at me, the bore. "I'll beat 'em up for you." Spike was knocking on the door. "I gotta get busy." "I guess you'd better start calling the neighbors," she said with her hyper voice faltering. "Why?" "To invite them." "Not in a million years, Nora. I'm hanging up now." No word from Blair?" "She's on an airplane, Nora. Call me later." Spike's borrowed wagon was a red radio flyer that had seen its better years. With one look, Luther deemed it too small and too old, but they had no choice. "I'll go over first," he explained, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. "Wait 5 minutes, then bring the wagon over. Don't let anyone see you, okay? Where's my $40? Luther handed him a 20. "Half now, half when the job's done." He entered the Trogdon home through the side door of the garage and felt like a burglar for the first time in memory. When he opened the door to the house, an alarm beeped for a few seconds, very long seconds in which Luther's heart froze and his entire life and career flashed before him. Caught, arrested, convicted, his license revoked, banished by Wiley and Beck, disgraced. Then it stopped, and he waited another few seconds before he could breathe. A panel by the rear door said things were clear. What a mess. The house was a landfill with debris strewn everywhere. Clear evidence of another successful visit by old St. Nick. Trish Trogdon would choke her husband if she knew he'd given Luther the keys. In the living room, he stopped and stared at the tree. It was well known on Hemlock that the Trogdons took little care in decorating their tree. They allowed their children to hang anything they could find. There were a million lights, strands of mismatched garlands, tacky ornaments by the boxload, red and green icicles, even strings of popcorn. Nora will kill me, Luther thought, but he had no choice. The plan was so simple it had to work. He and Spike would remove the breakable ornaments and the garlands and, for sure, the popcorn, lay them all on the sofa and chairs, ease the tree out of the house with the lights intact, haul it over to Luther's and dress it with real decorations. Then at some point in the near future, Luther and perhaps Spike would strip it again, haul it across the street, put the Trogdon junk back on it, and everybody would be happy. He dropped the first ornament, and it shattered into a dozen pieces. Spike showed up. "Don't break anything," Luther said as he cleaned up the ornament. "Are we getting in trouble for this?" Spike asked. "Of course not. Now get to work, and fast." 20 minutes later, the tree was stripped of anything breakable. Luther found a dirty towel in the laundry, and lying flat on his stomach under the tree, he managed to work the metal tree stand onto the towel. Spike leaned in above him, gently shoving the tree to one side, then the other. On hands and knees, Luther managed to slide the tree toward Spike, across the wood floor, across the tile of the kitchen, down the hall to the laundry, where the branches scraped the walls and dead spruce needles trailed behind. "You're making a mess," Spike said helpfully. "I'll clean it later," said Luther, who was sweating like a sprinter. The tree, of course, was wider than the door to the garage, as all trees are. Spike pulled the wagon close. Luther grabbed the trunk of the tree, lifted it with strength, swung the bottom through the door, and pulled the whole thing through. When it was sitting safely in the garage, Luther caught his breath, hit the garage door opener, and managed to smile at Spike. "Why are you so brown?" the kid asked. The smile vanished as Luther was reminded of the cruise he wouldn't be taking. He looked at his watch. 12:40. 12:40 and not a single guest for the party. No food, no frosty, no light strung anywhere, no tree as yet, but one on the way. It seemed hopeless at that moment. "You can't quit, old boy." Luther strained again and lifted the tree up. Spike shoved the wagon under, and of course the metal tree stand was wider than the radio flyer. Luther got it balanced, though, and watched it for a moment. "You sit there," he said, pointing to a tiny spot in the wagon and under the tree. "Keep it from tipping over. I'll push." "You think this'll work?" Spike said with great suspicion. Across the street, Ned Becker had been minding his own business when he saw the tree disappear from the Trogdons' front window. 5 minutes passed, and the tree reappeared in the open garage, where a man and a kid were wrestling with it. He looked harder and recognized Luther Crank. Watching every move, he called Walt Scheel on a portable phone. "Hey, Walt, Ned here. Merry Christmas, Ned. Merry Christmas, Walt. Say, I'm watching the Trogdons' house, and it appears as if Crank has lost his mind." "How's that?" "He's stealing their Christmas tree." Luther and Spike began their way down the Trogdon driveway, which had a slight decline to the street. Luther was behind the wagon, hanging on, letting it roll slightly. Spike clutched the trunk of the tree, terrified. Scheel peeked out his front door, and when he saw the theft with his own eyes, he punched the number for the police. The desk sergeant answered. "Yes, this is Walt Scheel. 1481 Hemlock. There's a burglary underway right now." "Where?" "Right here, at 1483 Hemlock. I'm watching it in progress. Hurry." Trogdon's tree made it across Hemlock to the other side, right in front of the Becker house, where now in the front window, Ned, his wife, and Jude and his mother-in-law were watching. Luther negotiated a right turn with the handle and began pulling the wagon toward his house. He wanted to sprint before anyone saw him, but Spike kept telling him to take it slow. Luther was afraid to look around, and he didn't believe for a second that he was going unnoticed. When he was almost to his driveway, Spike said, "Cops!" Luther wheeled around just as the patrol car slowed to a stop in the middle of the street, lights flashing but no siren. 2 officers jumped out as if it were a SWAT mission. Luther recognized Salino with the large mustache, then young Treen with a thick neck, the same 2 who'd stopped by hawking calendars for the Police Benevolent Association. "Hello, Mr. Crank," Salino said with a smirk. "Hello. Where are you going with that?" asked Treen. "To my house," Luther said, pointing. He came so close. "Maybe you'd better explain," said Salino. Yeah, well, Wes Trogdon over there let me borrow his Christmas tree. He left town an hour ago, and me and Spike were just moving it. Spike? Luther turned and looked behind him. Down at the wagon, at the narrow gap where Spike had been, Spike was gone, nowhere to be seen on Hemlock. Yeah, a kid down the street. Walt Scheel had a seat on the 50-yard line. Bev was resting, or trying to. His laughter got so loud that she came to see what was the matter. Pull up a chair, honey. They've caught Crank stealing a tree. The Beckers were howling too. We got a report that a burglary was in progress, said Treen. There's no burglary. Who called? A Mr. Scheel. Whose wagon is this? I don't know. Spike's? So you stole the wagon too? Said Treen. I've stolen nothing. You have to admit, Mr. Crank, it looks very suspicious, Salino said. Yes, under normal circumstances, Luther might be forced to say that the entire scene was a bit unusual, but Blair was getting closer by the minute, and there was no time to back down. Not at all, sir. I borrow Trogdon's tree all the time. We'd better take you in for questioning, Treen said, and unsnapped a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The sight of the silver cuffs sent Walt Scheel to the floor. The Beckers were having trouble breathing, and Luther went weak at the knees. Come on, you can't be serious. Get in the back seat.